Right now, calling home. The New Zealander who's obliging us this week is in a dangerous place at Christmas. This is what he hears at night.
Oh, shit. That was close.
Why didn't I?
Imagine that nightmare made real. Jack Topzand describes himself this way. I'm a Kiwi living in Ukraine, volunteering in humanitarian work. I've mostly been engaged in reconstruction in the city of Mykolaiv, and we distribute aid in Ukraine's deoccupied territories. Thank you for coming on with us, Jack.
Thank you for having me.
You went up to Ukraine solo. Why did you go, Jack?
Well, it's a bit of a difficult question for me to answer, but I think it sort of boiled down to feeling kind of frustrated with the lack of support from New Zealand, and also just generally getting a little bit disillusioned with lack of media interest in New Zealand in Ukraine. And I felt quite strongly that if my country wasn't going to do enough, that, well, I may as well go and help by myself.
What were you doing at that point here?
So I had just returned back to New Zealand. I took a year off work. So I was formerly a data analyst for the Ministry of Education for 6 years. And then I decided to take a bit of a break, went traveling for a year, came home, and was sort of assessing my situation. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go back into my career or not, and decided to jump the gun, take the leap of faith, and just go to Ukraine.
You're from Kerikeri originally, but you did an international relations degree at Victoria, yeah?
Yes, I did a double major in international relations and political science, which is where my sort of fascination or obsession maybe with Ukraine started.
It's a fine thing to do. No regrets so far? I mean, you wouldn't be able to anticipate all you've found up there, but how is it for you?
For me, it's been sort of the best time of my life in a really strange way. I won't lie, it's not easy. It's been quite difficult here, but in a lot of ways, I kind of thrive in these environments where there's a lot of challenges and unknowns, and it's all very exciting. So I definitely don't have any regrets about coming here.
How long have you been in Mykolaiv now?
4 months in Mykolaiv. I spent a month in Kyiv originally, working in reconstruction there, cleaning up from bombed out buildings, things like that, and doing some other reconstruction work.
Mykolaiv is basically Ukraine's gateway to the Black Sea, isn't it?
Yes, one of two remaining, so the other being Odessa.
Right. And you have the famous grain lands, the steppe lands nearby, I was reading.
Yes, it is. It truly is the steppe.
Yeah, endless grain stretching for as far as you can see. Who do you live with?
I live with a bunch of other humanitarian volunteers. So at the moment, I'm working with an organization called Koridor UA, which is actually a Czech organization. So they're headquartered out of Prague, but we have a team on the ground in Mykolaiv.
You're sustaining yourself, aren't you?
For the most part. So the good thing with Koridor is that they do pay for my food and accommodation. So that goes a long way to sustaining me in country. But everything else, my travel to and from, everything else is I have to cover it myself. So it's not exactly easy. It's all ended up costing a lot more than I expected, but it's quite manageable with them covering some of my costs.
Okay. And the other volunteers that you live with, they're from all over the world or mainly Europe?
Mostly Europe, but I have worked with, at the moment I'm living with an Australian, and I've just had a French guy and a Dutch guy leave. We have a lot of Czech guys, believe it or not. And I've also worked with Americans, Englishmen. Yeah, so a little sort of United Nations in Mykolaiv.
Mainly men, obviously.
Mainly men. We've had one or two women. There are a surprising number of female volunteers in Ukraine. Sometimes they're even better than the men, to be honest.
What does a typical day look like for you?
Recently, it's been still mostly reconstruction. So we work in the deoccupied territories. So this is the areas of Mykolaiv and Kherson Oblast that were occupied by the Russians at the beginning of the invasion. So we're in villages that are pretty heavily damaged. Almost all of the buildings will be damaged or destroyed. We mostly focus on civil buildings. So we do things like schools, libraries, this kind of thing. And so we
Reconstruction.
just, yeah, reconstruction. Yeah. Recently, we've been working on it's been a bit of a long-term project. We have partnered with a rehabilitation center for children and animals in Mykolaiv Oblast. And we're building them a new classroom so that they can increase their capacity to provide physical therapy and art therapy, language therapy to children that live through occupation. So that's a particularly fulfilling project, that one.
Yeah, I can imagine. There was the Battle of Mykolaiv, wasn't there, about 3 years ago when the Russians as swarmed across the
Yes.
area, and I imagine people have told you all about that.
Yes, the signs of that are still everywhere. So there are shell holes in the street. There's a lot of shrapnel damage on buildings. All around my apartment, there are trenches that were dug into the side of the road in preparation for the Russians to come into the city. There are bunkers. It's funny because I think a lot of people, when they hear this, they're either quite alarmed or quite sort of they find it quite striking. But it's amazing what you get used to. I barely notice it anymore. It's just part of the scenery.
The people, how have you found them in the midst of this horrible war?
Ukrainians are some of the best people I've ever met. They are just so incredible. They are so resilient. They're so inspiring. And I originally thought it was because of the war that they had this real zest for life and this sort of optimism and hope. But the more I've got to know Ukrainians, the more I've begun to realize it is part of their culture. Because I guess they've been through so much throughout history that they've had to take a very positive attitude towards things. So it's very refreshing to be around. You don't get a lot of cynical sort of doom speak. It's very pragmatic, practical, optimistic language that they use. It's very refreshing to be around.
What are the challenges of what you do in your reconstruction work? I think there are a few, aren't there?
Yes, so the biggest one we have is that obviously as soon as a building is hit, it has to be cleared for unexploded ordnance, just to make sure there's nothing that's going to go boom again. Then we have the problem of if it's an impact site, like a recently hit building, if we have an air raid, then we have to leave the work site immediately because the Russians have a nasty habit of conducting what we call a double tap or a double strike, which is when they hit the same site a day or two later, deliberately to try and catch rescue workers, volunteers out in the open. So those are the sort of immediate dangers. And then we have all of the various occupational hazards, I would say. So a lot of these buildings are not structurally safe, they're not structurally stable. There's a real shortage of civil engineers to come and inspect a lot of these places. So a lot of the time, we just have to jump straight into it and be very careful about what we do and what we decide to work on and what we decide is too dangerous to work on. And then the surprising thing for me, and it was never something I thought about or really considered before I came here, was the asbestos contamination, because it is truly everywhere here. They only outlawed asbestos in 2023, which means that the buildings here are absolutely full of the stuff. And there is unfortunately no sort of culture of asbestos awareness, asbestos safety. So a lot of these sites are very heavily contaminated, and unfortunately, people have been working on them with absolutely no protection. And that is something that I've been trying to change.
You could use some help with the asbestos, couldn't you? You could use some Kiwi expertise if that were at all possible.
Yes, we've been trying to get some expertise, particularly around advice. I know it can be difficult because the asbestos-containing materials here are most likely different to what people in New Zealand will be familiar with. We don't have access to testing facilities. we don't have access to a great deal of expertise here. And obviously we're volunteers, none of us are experts. So we're doing our best to keep people safe and to keep Ukrainians safe as well, because we're quite concerned about the level of exposure. But we have been struggling with sort of developing best practice, this sort of stuff.
So if someone were able to get in touch with you and consult with you, that would be a bonus. That would be a great thing for you.
It would make my year. It really feels like an issue that no one is really aware of here, and it's been a real uphill battle to try and get that advice. So it would really make my year if someone reached out to me. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we can ask people who might have that level of expertise and the time to help to get in touch with us, and we can forward that on to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, no, it's a pleasure. What will Christmas be like where you are?
Christmas, I'm going to be in Kyiv for Christmas. I'm hoping, fingers and toes crossed, for some snow. But Christmas in Ukraine is a relatively new thing. I say relatively new because they used to use the Russian calendar Christmas, and I think it was only about 10 years ago that they switched to the Western calendar Christmas.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, they've adopted it quite quickly. So I'm hoping to visit some Christmas markets, spend time with friends. I've been fortunate enough to make many a friend in Ukraine, and the sort of friendships that will probably stand the test of time too.
We played the sound of Russian drones attacking at night from one of your social media feeds. We borrowed it from that. But Mykolaiv's also been hit by ballistic missiles. Can you tell us at all about what that is like? Maybe lying in bed, hearing the sounds of machines in the sky that you know are going to kill someone.
The first time it happened, it was quite jarring. It's amazing what you get used to. The sound is so much louder and more present than you will ever hear than you will ever really understand or experience through a speaker. The first thing that surprised me was feeling the shock waves of the explosions. Even when they land a kilometer away, you really feel it through your body. So it's quite terrifying. The first time it happened, I had quite a surprising reaction. I wouldn't say I'm particularly scared by it, but it felt very personal. I was reminded of this phenomena where they say that terror bombing civilians doesn't work because it just sort of hardens the resolve of the population. And I feel like I felt that within seconds of the first explosion, because suddenly it felt personal. It felt like, well, what have I done to you? Why are you bombing me? So, it's very loud. The whole experience is very, very loud. We're very fortunate that we have very well-established air defense systems here now, and you can hear them working. So there's a lot of automatic fire, a lot of automatic machine gun fire, autocannons, surface-to-air missiles, all going off at once. You see the searchlights in the sky, you see the traces flying into the sky. There is also a bit of a dark humor that Ukrainians have. So a lot of people here call it fireworks. They don't refer to it as being attacked. They'll often refer to it as watching the fireworks. It can be quite terrifying.
I'm sure.
We've had some extremely close calls. About a week or two ago in Mykolaiv, we had one land maybe 100 meters from us.
Sure.
Really shook the building. The Shaheds especially, these are Iranian designed drones originally. I think Iran still supplies Russia with quite a few of them. They're very noisy, and they are designed to be a terror weapon, and they really do terrify you because you can hear them coming, and they're very loud and ominous sounding. And but the scary thing is that the engine will cut out, so you'll hear this enormous sound as it sort of drones towards you, and then it will suddenly go silent, which means the engine is cut out and it's now in a dive. And that sort of 8 to 10 seconds before it hits is probably the most terrifying moments of my life whenever that happens, because you're just not sure where they're going to land. So, yeah, but it's amazing what you get used to. It's I often lie in bed and don't go anywhere these days. I get woken up by them in the middle of the night and often just go back to sleep. Yeah.
Goodness me. Jack Topzand is calling home from Mykolaiv in Ukraine. So it's a modern city, isn't it? About 500,000 people.
Yes, the population dropped quite a bit at the beginning of the war, but it's since been um, repopulated by people from Khersonska Oblast or from Kherson city itself. It's relatively bustling and lively and normal. Life just sort of carries on.
It feels strange to ask about sights to see, which we usually do, but there is Ukraine's biggest zoo. There's which I think is
Yes.
that's still extant. That's going.
It's operational.
Okay.
There are animals there. They seem relatively happy. You know, we're only sort of 60 kilometers from the Russians, and they decided that no, we will have a zoo here, and it will continue to operate.
And the celebrated observatory, there's a museum of shipbuilding. You told us in an email that you would take us to dinner if we were there with a local family, and you described their typically almost aggressive hospitality. What does that involve?
Yeah. Yes, so this is a phenomenon in Ukraine, particularly in the villages. So if I ever bring anyone to Ukraine, I would insist on getting out of the city and going to the countryside, because in many ways there are two Ukraines. There are the city people and the village people. And interestingly enough, the villages are where a lot of the Ukrainian culture is at its strongest. The cities were not mostly, but they were Russified. So there's a lot more Russian language spoken in the cities. There's a lot less Ukrainian culture in the cities. The villages are where Ukraine is really at its strongest. You cannot say no to anything. Anything you are offered, you must eat or drink it. And I don't think I've ever eaten so much food in my entire life, to be honest. I was told once, can you breathe? Can you still breathe? And I said, yes, I can still breathe. And they said, well, that means you still have room. Keep eating.
You'll be eating or
Um,
slurping a lot of borscht, won't you? What do Ukrainians tend to put in it?
Borscht, there's a few different, it varies region to region, but the classic is it's a beetroot base. So it's normally sour, like slightly sour soup. So it'll have beetroot, cabbage, carrot, normally pork or beef in there as well. Some dill. They top it with the Ukrainians have an obsession with what they call smetana. We would call it sour cream. It's a little bit thinner than the sour cream in New Zealand, but it is quite nice. But they have a real obsession with the stuff. We often joke that the Ukrainians wear it as sunscreen because they just love the stuff so much.
What is the general feeling about the state of the war?
People are very tired. When you talk to people about the war, everyone is exhausted. I mean, it's been over 1,300 days now. It's approaching the fifth year, so it'll be 4 years in January. Everyone I meet is directly impacted. You don't really meet people that have not been directly impacted in some way or another. I mean, they're up to 12 million or more internally displaced people. So the scale of the suffering and the frustration is enormous. Generally speaking, people are still optimistic. There's still a lot of optimism that they're not going to back down. They're going to keep fighting, but you really sense the exhaustion now setting in. I feel like now is more than ever important to come and help because they really need it. And as people sort of start to lose interest in Ukraine, I mean, we've seen it here. There's the number of volunteers has dried up. It is not uncommon to meet people who have absolutely horrific stories from this war. But again, they tell you, and there's a moment or two of quite deep reflection, and then it's straight back into laughter and joy and making the most of life, which I just really admire.
I bet you do. Well, we salute you, Jack, for what you're doing. What will you do when you run out of money to stay in Ukraine and have to leave? Have you ever thought of a GoFundMe page or anything like that?
Yeah, I feel like this is going to turn into a bit of a trial run. So this being a bit of a trial run means that I've figured out what I need to do differently, what I should do in preparation next time, and how I can sort of leverage who I know and what I know back home to prepare myself better for next time. But yeah, maybe a GoFundMe or something would be good next time. But I think it's difficult for people to understand just how difficult things are here. and to really want to know the best way to help. I mean, there are a number of organizations out there that are asking for your money, and some of which I would recommend donating to, others I would certainly not advise donating to. But I would say one of the biggest initiatives that's running at the moment that is definitely worth your money is a lot of these anti-drone net campaigns, because there are places near the front line that are marauded basically by Russian FPV drones and fiber optic drones, and they are basically terrorizing the local population. But there is a very cheap and effective countermeasure, which is to essentially erect old fishing nets to cover the roads and the bus stops and things like that, and that prevents them from impacting their targets. It's extremely affordable. It's an extremely cost-effective way to help at the moment, and it has a very high impact per dollar. So if you see any of those types of campaigns, I highly, highly recommend donating to those, because they are extremely necessary at the moment.
I'm sure your advice is the best advice in that respect. Again, congratulations on what you're doing. Such fine work. And I know that you probably have downplayed the dangers and the travails involved in being in Ukraine. I hope you have the best possible Christmas in Kiev. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
Jack Topzand in Ukraine. So if you can help Jack with your knowledge of best practice with asbestos, or tell someone you know who works in the area that Jack could use a hand as he and his mates clean out those buildings, do let us know. Sunday@rnz.co.nz